Good morning. I think we're live. So I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the Ignite Tour Amsterdam, and I also have the pleasure of welcoming you to the first of many Microsoft 365 security track sessions today and tomorrow. So I'm Adam Harbour. I'm part of the Microsoft 365 security team. I would love for some followers on Twitter. I've been trying to tweet some security and Azure AD news. I may intermix some cat memes, so hopefully you can enjoy some of those as well. But we have a really great offering from our team of tremendous security news, some really interesting things constantly going on with Azure AD, so feel free to follow me. Don't feel pressured to do so. Please, at least at a minimum, follow the Azure AD Twitter handle. It's pretty tremendous. So given that this is the first security track session, I think we should start. We are in an identity Azure AD session, but I think we should start thinking about security broadly. So within Microsoft, we think of security as a multi-layered approach. We are here, rightfully so, in the first security session talking about identity, which is very appropriate. Identity is a foundational piece of building a comprehensive security infrastructure within your organization. So that piece that needs to happen is you need to have a strong and secure and seamless authentication piece within your identity infrastructure. So you want to have the balance here of high security, but also high productivity. You have to balance that user friction. The more friction we create within our authentication infrastructure, the more that we're going to find that users are going to try to get around that friction. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to protect data, organizational data, our most sensitive, valuable resource. And within that data, once you have authentication covered, you can layer around that data information protection, right? Policies that consider sensitive information within this data independent of some access decisions. So we could have applied a conditional access policy as part of the authentication, but maybe we have a credit card number in a file. So independent of some of those access decisions, we would want to layer and protect that data. Now, outside of that, we have threat protection. This is where we're going to be looking for these ever advanced and complex attacks into our organization, very savvy, sometimes very difficult to detect. And we're going to take our best efforts to remediate those threats as soon and as automated as possible. And then we also need to consider some security management piece. So let's give some visualization, some concept of how are we doing within our infrastructure of security? Are we protecting it? Are we doing everything we can? So if you attend every security session today, this is how we in Microsoft 365 think of security. You'll find a lot of the same terms and a lot of the same concepts. It's a really nice puzzle. Please attend as many pieces as possible to understand those layers. So again, we're here talking about identity, and it's, again, rightfully so that we're talking about it, especially within a security context, because this is a favorite attack vector of bad actors, hackers. Right? And why is that so? Passwords are weak. Passwords are bad. The only people that love passwords are hackers. 81% of breaches caused by credential theft, right? Passwords are easy to phish. People are easy to trick. What can we do to stop that? Well, one thing we could do is think of a world without passwords, right? 73% of passwords are duplicates. So when I was mentioning earlier about that friction, that need to move around the security layer from a user perspective to get to just do the work they want to do, this is some of the reason why passwords are so weak. I just want to get my work done. I don't want to remember this. I don't want to have 30 passwords. And think about also the context of within digital transformation, the explosive growth of applications that are accessible within the cloud. Employees are bringing in these applications into your organizations, and how do we understand the data that it's moving in and out through these other applications that may or may not be approved for use. So one thing, if you walk away, if you don't listen to me or any other security track for the rest of the 2 days, one minimal approach, please, 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 please have MFA turned on. So at a bare minimum, MFA is going to thwart a gigantic chunk of these attacks. Now, as mentioned, attacks get more complex. There's extra layers that we have to watch for. But within the identity context, when you listen to all these different tracks, please walk away with that. If you don't have that turned on today, please go do so tomorrow. So think about the challenges, and I would imagine many of you are experiencing some of these challenges right now within your own organizations. With the complexity of digital transformation, the scale of growth of options for users to have, things to access, this is providing some of the needs that you have today and finding a more complex and modernized identity solution. So the explosion of apps, devices, and users outside of the network. We have partners, we have vendors, we have people traveling outside. Very rarely we have our entire group of users sitting within one protected network. And the devices, you have BYOD, you have your work phone, your personal phone, your computer, your demo device, that explosive growth, all of those endpoints, we need to consider that broad surface area in terms of protecting and having those as identity endpoints as well. Think about the identity attacks. As we mentioned, identity attacks getting ever so complex, and the favorite attack vector is credentials. So we have to take that into consideration as well as how are we protecting our identities. Data privacy, right? That's a huge concern, something that we at Microsoft take very seriously as well. But also regulations and compliance as well. Are we doing everything the needful that we need to do to make sure we are compliant within our organizations? And then just generally that modernization, digital transformation drive, the scale that IT needs to manage is quite tremendous. And so how can we have solutions that help us keep up with that scale and scale appropriately so that you are able to focus your efforts on the most needful priorities? So identity, appropriately so. You're sitting in an identity session. So you may have seen this slide a few times. This is something we've been saying for a while, and it's not like, okay, Microsoft, that's great, you keep saying this, you're trotting out this term, but it is so critically important to understand and believe, and hopefully many of you are identity architects that understand this as well, that identity really is the control plane of this explosive growth. Fundamentally, before we really get into the complex elements of what we all need to do within our organizations, you have users that need to get on stuff with devices. And within that digital transformation explosive growth, that's ever happening at a more complex level. And these things that we need to get resources to, they may be SaaS apps, they may be applications within your on-premise network today, web applications, devices, again, BYOD, something that you control within your own network, and just the sheer amount of employees, partners, vendors. It's quite tremendous. And so we see identity here as the control plane to manage this chaos. And again, within digital transformation, driving the chaos on the outside, how can we, as identity of the control plane, equally transform, modernize, and address the scale? Microsoft Azure Active Directory. So this is, again, a new layer. Think of, we've looked at security layer here, identity as an element of it. This is how we kind of consider within the Azure AD team some of the elements that we're helping address you, the customers, or you, the interested parties in Azure AD, of how we're addressing some of your most critical business needs. Most fundamentally, and this is what we're going to focus on mostly today in this session, I would love to address all these things. These are like hours and hours and hours of discussion. A really great thing is we have some tremendous identity experts here with us live in Amsterdam that are going to dive into each of these pillars in greater detail. But let's consider first just modernization of access. And let's be honest, this entire slide, this entire concept of modernization of identity is really modernizing access, really at its foundational piece. But what we're considering here within modernizing access is really more about the connection to resources and applications specifically. So we need to drive seamless, secure connections to applications, single sign-on, as convenient as possible for users to not have to remember 30, 40, 50, 200 passwords, right? And we need to do this efficiently, productively, across, again, SaaS, on-prem, whatever applications are needed there, we need to have this mindfulness of a common identity driving this seamless access. And then within that, once you have your users connected through all of their applications that they can get their work done, right, we have a concept of identity lifecycles. So the users themselves are going through some evolution within their tenure in your organization. There's new hires, there's changes in access needs, there's terminations. And through compliance needs, governance, we need to ensure that users are able to access their resources in a timely basis, and those accesses are taken away in a timely basis as well to protect our infrastructure. And also self-service too. This is really a scalability piece within IT modernization. The more that we can drive our users to manage things on their own and in a trusted manner so that IT, you guys can focus on the things that you need to prioritize. This is something we would like to empower users to do within, again, the right mindfulness of security. Secure and govern is something that we are going to drill down in a tremendously deep level in a few sessions later today. Towards the end of the session, we'll talk about some of those available opportunities for you to learn more and some of the amazing identity experts that we have here to talk on that. But just at a broad level, we're starting to think of this as, and you started to hear this concept come out of us, zero trust, right? So never trust, always verify. So it's not just your network perimeter anymore, and you're controlling the in and outs, but really the concept here, key concept, conditional access. No matter what device, no matter what user, we need to trust that the access here is valid. And so we're not going to go into tremendous detail, some excellent complementary sessions to go into this today. Connect and collaborate, kind of what I said, that Modernize access is really this entire slide. This is a complementary external piece of that concept of modernizing access. So while you have employees that need to gain access seamlessly and securely, we also have partners, vendors as well, external folks, and within a customer context as well. Some of those customers, if you have an application that you would like to drive customer purchase or other information, customer loyalty engagement, this is a layer as well where it's important to have some mindfulness of identity because you still have to manage credentials there as well. And then finally, taking a concept of applications but flipping it and thinking of it on the developer piece, right? There is that authentication security that's need to manage at that layer, and Azure AD can help address that as well. Again, a great session, I believe tomorrow, which will show that you could look at it in this context. Maybe you're building applications within your organization, maybe you're application developers, and so hopefully this will be super relevant to you as well. So something we're really proud of on the Azure AD side is we believe we truly are the world's #1 enterprise identity service. And there's some awesome big numbers throughout there, the scale that are multiple X's larger than the next competitor. Something we're super proud of as a recent milestone is we achieved 100 million paid Azure AD seats. So this is either through an Azure AD Premium standalone license or partnering with EMS, so Enterprise Mobility and Security, which is a suite within Microsoft 365. So it's a huge achievement, huge recognition of all the work that we're doing to protect you and the recognition of the value of that. And so it's not even just the super advanced security, but some of the scalability and management available to you, even in the minimum P1 license. If some of you folks are premium license holders today, we really appreciate you being part of this great achievement. So let's drill a little deeper into a few of these pillars and think about some of the business challenges we have and some of the ways that Azure AD can address them. I will have some demos. We'll get our hands a little dirty in the Azure AD portal. And then I am also going to be available at the Expo booth for security tomorrow as well. So anything that you see here that we need to go in another layer, we'll have plenty of time to do that tomorrow. So thinking within modernization of access, specifically connection to applications. Let's just look at that as a baseline need of building up and modernizing our identity infrastructure. So first and foremost, it's all about seamless access to applications. So we need to get users on a common identity to access all of the applications they need to in a secure manner. And once all of those applications are connected and driven through Azure AD, your identity provider of choice, then we want to think about how do we drive all of the user data we have into these applications to help us drive that efficiency of access. So it's not just enough we're connecting the applications, we have to drive the user data within them, so we consider as provisioning. And then how do we empower self-service? So think of something like self-service password reset. Again, getting users to have some power to drive some information and actions. So IT folks aren't sitting on help desk calls all day to drive SSPR calls, right? If this can be driven in a secure manner with a good adoption by the end users, this is something that we can save a lot of time and cost as well. And our big concept here, we use the word hybrid identity, so hopefully this is something that many of you identify with. Unless you're a very brand new company, you probably are hybrid identity infrastructure. And what we consider here is there's a component of on-prem and a component of cloud. We're trying to get them to work seamlessly together to drive that common identity. And a lot of you probably have AD, right? 95% of major enterprises are using that today. So we have lots of tools that we're getting Azure AD to work together seamlessly with Active Directory, on-prem Windows Server Active Directory as well to drive that common identity. Think of hybrid identity as not a solution, it's a state of being. It's where we are today in this digital transformation. And there's lots of really incremental steps we can take to achieve more and more modernization. We will still be on that hybrid journey for a while. It's going to take some time to truly achieve that. It's going to take some time from a pure deployment standpoint. But think of this as some baby steps that we can take. Let's think about foundations. Then okay, we got all our apps. How are we doing with our users? Okay, our users are good. We have good identity foundations. Let's run towards security. Think of this whole story layered today as some of that broader hybrid modernization context of each of these stories are part of that greater identity hybrid story. So within the application ecosystem, keep saying common identity, SSO, and really our solution here within the Azure AD world is Azure AD Connect. So this is really driving the synchronization of AD and Azure AD together so that wherever the user is accessing their information, if they're on-prem, if they're remote, that we're driving that seamless experience and it always feels the same to the user. And a key here, again, if we can drive that SSO, that seamless experience that never fails, this is a key piece of users starting to quickly build a world without passwords. So when you go to some of the security sessions, we'll talk about Windows Hello, Microsoft Authenticator, some of the exciting new stuff that's happened recently with FIDO 2-spec, WebAuthn becoming official, and the work we're doing behind it within the Azure AD world. That's building an initial access world without passwords, and then this SSO piece is very complementary to that. And it doesn't matter what application we're accessing, and this is something, a common misconception. Azure AD is not an identity provider just for Office apps. It's not the necessary evil that you have to deal with, and then we can connect up through something else. You can certainly do that, use your option of choice. We believe that Azure AD is a strong solution through some of the reasons we've been talking about and will continue to talk about. But we do have thousands of applications pre-integrated, hundreds of thousands of applications connected today through a lot of the on-prem web applications as well. So application agnostic, drive that access from cloud identity, and then you can access cloud security from there. Specifically to on-prem, we have our solution called Application Proxy. Some of you, if you're Azure AD users, should have heard of this by now. So that piece that I said, we've got hundreds of thousands of applications connected, that's really driven through Application Proxy, and it's helping us complement that common identity story. And the piece here is it's driving secure remote access to your on-premise applications. So wherever the user is located, they're getting that great seamless access experience. And the key here is no VPNs are needed, right? VPNs can be really scary. So when we talked earlier about some of the threat vector attacks on credentials, You get a username and password, you get into that VPN, and the hacker's going to have a fun time. So if we can get this secure, seamless access and remote access through application proxy, that's a really major complement to driving much better identity security. So again, here, remember the story. It's not just, when we call third party, it's a very Microsoft-centric term. But the concept here is, you've got X amount of Microsoft cloud services, and there's thousands and thousands of other applications that you can connect through quite easily, well integrated with Azure AD today, either through application proxy or through our built-in web gallery, application gallery that we'll look at in a little bit. So once you have all of your applications connected, this is the other piece we were talking about in terms of what about the user data that flows through that. So once you have that end-to-end connection, inbound and outbound, you can have a truly complete flow of data and manage an identity lifecycle. So we have Workday HR listed here. We'll talk a little bit of that specifically and then the broader HR context. But think of HR as the source of truth of a lot of critical employee data before and during hiring process. So very likely there's been some kind of interview, some kind of initial application. A lot of that resides in the HR world before we get to it into our identity infrastructure. And then once we have made that hire decision, that employee is going to go through their life cycle, decision changes are going to be made. And so all of that, this end-to-end piece is really critical. So HR, source of truth, Azure AD is the control plane, outbound driving access from all of the critical applications that are necessary. Here's an example of an app panel. This is my apps, whether you're using the Office ribbon, waffle, so be it, whatever access panel you need. This is end-to-end user creation, end-to-end user access, and then the management within termination. We got to quickly turn that user's very fundamentally, instantly turn off that user's access so we're compliant and we're secure. And the component here as well, Azure AD Connect works also with this, so we can have some synchronization of that employee data from the AD world to the Azure AD world as well. So some of this, if you're Power Azure AD users, is probably very familiar, a nice refresher of the 100 level concepts of what we're doing within Azure AD. And something that's been really exciting, we're really proud of, is almost weekly we're driving new features, new incremental improvements. So Azure AD is modernizing as well within your own modernization of your enterprises and organizations. So I wanted to catch a few of these. When we look at these pillars, we'll take a look, and some of these will pivot some discussions we'll have within the demos. But as I was mentioning before, Workday inbound user provisioning, we turned this on generally available in January, and we already have, I believe, a few hundred integrations just in that short amount of time. Plenty of people working on the deployment now. I know we'll get to the question of what about other than Workday. We'll talk about that in a bit. But this is really our first step in this world of the inbound HR source of truth. And so please, if you are a Workday user, if you're considering between a couple of options of what you're doing within your own HR modernization, if you would like to check this out, this is fully available, ready to use, not just a preview and you're not ready to touch that yet. Please go run at it today. It is generally available. And then very recently, we announced some new features within application proxy. So we have SAML SSO, and we'll actually take a look at what this looks like from the portal perspective. But in the same motion that if you're setting up and connecting applications within Azure AD, this same motion, the same identity admin experience, we can now drive that on the application proxy side and connect in, again, SSO. So we're using the modern SAML standard here, but maybe you're thinking of, okay, I have on-prem applications that I do want to modernize their standards as well. You could consider, okay, let's either, instead of moving this to a SaaS application, let's at least get this going on SAML SSO. So from a connecting standpoint, very secure. We're happy with a standards, open standards standpoint to use the SAML standard. And this is something we'll take a look at in a little bit. But then also you have cookie settings as well. So you can set HTTP-only cookies if you want to protect them against actions like copying or modifying the cookies from a client-side scripting. You can have secure cookies that are going to use a TLS secure channel. Or you can have persistent cookies if you want to set the access to not expire. So this is something, please, it's not just the top 20 SaaS applications that we want connected. Think of your entire app ecosystem and drive those for the management, the scalability, the security benefits within identity as a control plane within Azure AD. And then token encryption. So this is also something that we just announced as public preview, I believe a few weeks ago. And so I believe for some of you, it may resonate as a blocker that you haven't been able to move some of your applications from ADFS Federation today because of this requirement. It may be an application requirement. It may be an internal security or compliance requirement. So we're very happy to share that we have this public preview feature available. We're running very quickly to a general availability on this as well. So it's part of the context of connect all your apps, and it's not just get them in some kind of Microsoft federation, but truly drive and connect them through Azure AD. Here's an opportunity to transition and move some of those from ADFS as well. Cool. So it's a lot of me talking, so let's look a little bit within the portal. If we can get this up. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about apps. We are going to go to, let's go with this guy. So first, I want to make sure in terms of a comfort level, if you are power users, this may be boring, but I want to say foundationally, you want to spend a lot of time within the Azure Active Directory enterprise application world. So to create that great security foundation, spend lots of time in here connecting a ton of apps to Azure AD. And so we can see here an example of some of the applications that are already connected. But so this experience has changed if you haven't connected something to Azure AD in a while, or if you've had some blockers that you have been dragging your feet. This is a better experience, a more user-friendly experience. Specifically, if you get within the SAML world, it can be very efficiently one-click or low-click experience. We have a lab a little bit later today. It's only a 50-seat lab, but if folks drop out, if you feel like you want to go through some foundations of connecting SaaS applications to Azure AD, we have that, I believe at 1210 or 110. We'll take a look at that at the end. But that's something that's going to go through this in much greater detail. But if you want to add an application, you can see here today, it's an application that you're developing. It's an on-premise application that we're going to connect through App Proxy. Maybe it's something that we don't have in our pre-integrated application gallery that we can either have added or you can still have connected. But certainly some of the top SaaS applications we already have pre-integrated. So if we want to look, for example, if I can spell correctly, for Zendesk. So this experience as well has been a bit more intuitive. We've got a new blade here explaining some of the details. This is going to be a SAML-based sign-on. And we do have a direct link to a deployment guide on each single one of these applications that are pre-integrated with the gallery. So this is going to go into much greater detail in a walkthrough. So that lab that we have later today, we have one of these effective labs and walkthrough guides for each single one of these applications in the gallery that's going to go step by step and make it as comfortable as possible so that you can be familiar, comfortable with these motions and connecting them within seconds. And I want to give you an example of some of the features we also have to kind of friendly help you to make sure that these connections are going efficiently. So if we're going to look at Salesforce, so just in the efficiency of time, I already pre-integrated a little bit of this application. But if we want to look in the single sign-on piece, remember, single sign-on should be very foundational, very critical, common identity driven, so users don't have to remember their passwords and can quickly gain access to their resources. So we've got some basic information here of some of the domain for this particular Salesforce account. We've got our SAML certificate and expiration date loaded here. We've got some of our URL info, and we actually have this feature here with test single sign-on. So this is pre-integrated within the Azure AD portal to give you a quick sense of, okay, I've done all this. Do I have to go off and load a new window and test it? What's going on? This can give you some really quick feedback to see. So I'm logged in as the admin here. We're going to sign in and see if it lets me do SSO, and it should say no. Let's Let's hope it says no. If it works, great. I did everything efficiently and beautiful. Oh, it's not liking me because I have 3 of these loaded. So it says, sorry, but we're having trouble signing in. So we have some error information here that we're going to paste over back into Azure AD to see what it's suggesting is the problem. And aha, the user has not been granted access to the application. So that's a big problem. We can't sign in and test SAML SSO as the user, even if it's at admin level, if the admin hasn't been added to this application. So this is just an example of some of the stuff we can catch quickly to see if you've forgotten certain mappings or there's certificate issues. But then we can go back and verify. If we go back to users and groups, we can see it's a sales and marketing group, security group that's been loaded here. And if we look at the members, we've got a bunch of users, but yes, correct, we don't have the admin here. And if we went back to the application, I can paste that error thing again. Single sign-on. We're going to post this. Within the resolution guide, you actually have one-click fix-its as well. So we're doing what we can here to make this as efficiently as possible for you to quickly get to that identity foundation. And so we talked about this is building our application connectivity ecosystem. What about now a taste of this HR inbound provisioning, driving that source of truth? So we wanted to give us a concept of looking actually in Workday HCM world. So this is an example. This is the demo tenant, but a chief human resource officer. And we're going to search for a particular user and see if we can trace some of the hiring and identity lifecycle steps within the Workday world before it even got into our own identity directory. So we're going to search for Jeff Marsh. And we're going to see here within the Workday application that there are some examples of instances that's changed within this identity lifecycle even before it's gotten to any kind of directory. So we have Jeff here. It looks like he's going for a customer service operations support role. Pre-hire information loaded. There's some decisions and changes of attributes here. There has been a hire decision, so we can click in here and see that Jeff, there was a hire date of September 16th of last year to hire Jeff. And we can go back and say, so we do have inbound provisioning connected here, and the Workday application gives a signal back to the HR to say, all the necessary work has been completed, you've taken the hire decision to this person, now we've driven this over to the identity administrator side of the world and started to drive an internal employee information for Jeff here. And we can see provisioning hire, Jeff also completed on 9/16. So this is really driving a seamless day one experience for this user and ensuring that he or she is as productive as possible on day one as possible, because we're not dragging out the provisioning, we're not asking an identity administrator to do some kind of custom scripting or flat filing or even manual upload of this. This is driven immediately from Workday into AD, Azure AD. So we can go look in our world here of Azure AD, click on users, if it wants to load. Okay, we're going to search for Jeff. So, good news. Jeff does have some identity directory information. And we can go back here as well, flip through and look back. If we click back one and we go into some of Jeff's employee details, these are going to be examples of some of these source of truth verified data. So HR has the onus to actually do identity verification on some maybe social security number, or so be it, passport number, some proof, birth certificate that Jeff is who he is. And so that's a really high confidence level of that attribute information being accurate. So if we click on Jeff here, we can see a little bit of information. We're going to have job details, employee. We can see he works 200 East Randolph Street in Chicago. There should be some information about the manager history. So we see that Scott Wilkinson is the manager. So we can see if some of these attributes made their way into the Azure AD world, and we can see Jeff March, look at that. Scott Wilkinson is the manager. 200 East Randolph Street is the address. So this is great. We didn't have to manually drive or custom script any of this stuff. This is directly from Workday into the Azure AD world. And Jeff can move very quickly on his first day of employment. So this is something now we get to the final question. Okay, Adam, I want more than just Workday. And we hear you. So this was our first step in this world. It's been a really great partnership and important integration for us. We're working with a couple other of the top cloud HR vendors right now on driving these integrations. We hope to have some really exciting news on that in the next couple of months. My chief provisioning engineer is like on hours and hours and hours of calls on this. So we're excited to try to drive this information for you by the summer to complement and be as agnostic as possible on the HR piece and make it as convenient for you based on whatever cloud HR you already have or part of the decision that you're making. So stay tuned for that. So let's go back. So then let's consider now the complementary piece of modernizing access is employee collaboration and really think of it from a vendor partner standpoint. So it's really important for these external identities to be user-centric and flexible. And ideally, the sharing motion, this is a really important piece of the Microsoft applications, the native sharing. We want it to feel like if you're collaborating with internal employee A should be as seamless and comfortable and easy as collaborating with external vendor A as well. So from an end user standpoint, and ideally as flexible from an IT management standpoint as well. You don't want to be creating shadow accounts all day just for all the vendors that you have. Secure and reliability is key here, and secure especially. So vendors, while they're gaining access to your resources, if there's some kind of external decision on their own identity lifecycle where they no longer should be accessing your resources, we want to make sure that that is taken as timely as possible as well to prevent those kind of threats. It needs to be global and scalable too. So we're talking to a global audience today, and so we need to have solutions that make it as seamless as possible. Oh no, you can only work with vendors in the Netherlands, right? It doesn't work if you're a global enterprise, which many of you are. So I think the key piece that you would get started in this world is taking a look at Azure AD B2B. And this is a piece about seamlessness, productivity. You keep hearing these words, but it's really critical. And driving this collaboration so that we are compliant, so that we are not allowing any kind of threat vectors from these external employees having the right access. So this external partner here wants to access an application or a document in this case. Okay, well, we can just send the doc over in an email. Well, now we've lost control of that data. Oh, well, let's go ahead and create a second account. Well, what if this person is terminated from their vendor position tomorrow, but you still have their Azure AD instance in your tenant? They have access to your stuff, and they don't even have access to their own employment information. So really what the key here is we want to separate authentication from authorization. So let's consider from multiple identity providers, we would love everybody in the world is a Microsoft customer, but we can appreciate that not everybody is. So independent of what kind of identity provider authentication solution the vendor is using, we want you to be able to work with them as seamlessly as possible. So we have Google Federation, MSA, Azure AD. We'll talk about in a second another option as well. But we trust that external party to say, yep, this user is who they say they are. And if that's the case, then we can say the go ahead and say, great, now they have the authorization to access this information. We've trusted you as the relying party to give that thumbs up. And you're going to start in the B2B world, and then eventually as you scale, if you have this consideration set of external customers and how you want to really drive great experiences, the underlying layer of B2C, you'll probably heard of like Kim Cameron, for example, if you've ever heard him speak, it's tremendous, but this identity experience framework. So within B2C, how do we more fundamentally drive authentications, but actually how can we create some kind of preferences information, there's a lot of consumer data that's happening within this B2C context. And then how can we really drive that to delight customers and maybe drive some loyalty decisions and really target specific elements? So if you have that data, can this B2C system help you drive those good experiences with that experience framework? And then, can we provide branded registration and login experiences, something that it doesn't really jarring all of a sudden they think they're logging into the Subway application and it takes them out and it looks like Microsoft and takes them back in. We want it to be as seamless and trusted as possible from an end user standpoint, and something that if you're willing to adopt, you want to have that low friction at the user side. So similarly, as we were thinking in the context of, well, okay, that's a very high-level foundational, and we'll look at this in a little bit more detail. What are some of the new things that we've added outside of just this baseline level that you can start using? So I had mentioned before, within the B2B context, you have Google social IDs, that federation that we can trust, you can build into Azure AD. We have MSAs, Microsoft accounts, and Azure AD accounts trusted as well. So what if there's somebody else? What if they don't have IT? What if this is a very small vendor operation and they just are happy to have an email? Well, what's really cool is within this B2B one-time passcode email context, you could work with vendors securely and as efficiently as possible, or at least highly productive as possible, while still trusting some other third-party authenticator here to say, yes, this person is good, potentially adding some additional layers of security to make sure there's no compromise here. So in this case, we're giving out a one-time passcode that has to be driven to the user's email, and the user comes back and says, okay, I got this. So it's trusting that they are the owner of this email. Now you could say emails can be compromised, very rightfully so. Then you could add additional, MFA requirement conditional access layers as well. So this just recently went into public preview. Again, something we hope to get you soon, generally available. But this is something you can play with today in your tenant and test it out if you do have those specific users. Maybe they're at Yahoo or so be it, whatever email. If they have an email, let's give it a shot. And then within the B2C world, we've taken a lot of feedback about some of the UI, the challenges of driving some of these customer flows and creating user flows within your B2C applications. So we've built this up so it's really making it easier to complete tasks in time, to have higher completion rates. And really, from a user standpoint, we're hearing that you can kind of test the flow, run the user flow, and get that experience at the end user level. So this is something that's generally available if you're turning on B2C, if you're paying for that component of Azure AD, this is something you can play with today. And then B2C custom password complexity. So said a lot of times about that balance of security and productivity, so we can appreciate within a customer loyalty or customer application context, you maybe don't want to make passwords incredibly difficult to really prevent someone from signing into your application. But hey, security is super important. So you have that chance to balance the level of complexity required to meet your business goal needs here. By default, we're going to set that to a strong complexity. And then you can so choose if whatever context here, if it's a lower risk, or if you have other security measures layered on top of that, that you can reduce this complexity. So again, generally available, something that you can play with in the B2C portal today. So let's take a minute and look at B2B of OTP emails. So I'm going to flip over here. This is just a dummy Yahoo account that I've created and did a little bit of pre-configuration early on. But let me show you from a portal standpoint, show you what I've done. So we're going to back out. This organizational relationships blade is going to be very important to you within the B2B world and managing some of this at an administrator level. So you can see I have some dummy accounts that I've worked here. I've got, here's Harbor Adam at Yahoo, is driven through OTP. You can get that information here. This was a Google, a Gmail, one of my own Gmails that I had configured here. And you can actually see within the identity provider blade that we have added Google as a trusted federation, Google social IDs here. So you can have that really seamless flexible experience without the need for OTPs. But if we go back to here, and then I had another dummy account that I had done through an MSA. So here's some examples of not within my organization, Azure AD. So we do say here that as of today, okay, Harbor Adam at Yahoo is signed up for OTP. Now the great thing about this OTPs is what we said earlier, we want to make sure that if there's employment actions taken outside of the organization at the vendor partner level, that is echoed as efficiently and quickly as possible within your own organization to stop threats. So this OTP, they have to verify and say, yes, I am who I am every 24 hours. So the original code that's sent, you have 30 minutes to use it or it expires. And then once they do use that code, every 24 hours, they're going to have to get a new code to access this. So it is a little bit of a friction on the partner side, but this is really focused on smaller partners with, again, minimal to no IT. They're happy to work with you. There's some critical element that you want to have to work with them that you don't want to add that compromise. The compromise here is that we're going to have to create a little bit more end-user friction to ensure that compliance and security. So this user, this external user, is signed up for OTPs. So then I'm going to flip back here, and we're going to try to access this. And it should ask me. I'm already logged in, so I'll do it from a private window. So we're going to take this. So this is someone from internal organization saying, okay, congratulations, you've been added into our tenant as a partner user. Please go ahead and start collaborating with us. And this is now unrecognized. It doesn't want to do it. Different guy. So we'll get in on my Yahoo account to give an example of the user. All right. So if it's going to find it. Okay. So we're going to add it from an end user partner experience to say, okay, I want to get in. And it says we just sent a code to the email. So we'll flip back over to this dummy Yahoo account. And boom. All right, here's your account verification code. May have already deleted that email within the 24-hour period, but it wants to make sure that I am supposed to have access to this. So I've already needed my password to get into my email. This is now a new factor to have another piece of information that I need. And boom. So in this particular case, I haven't set up any applications just for the simplicity of not driving a bunch of provisioning. But then within this My Application panel that you could be driving documents, applications. You can send them to the Office ribbon, Office waffle, whatever. So see, you can focus on particular documents as well. But you've done this all within the secure, productive context of Azure B2B without sending off documents, without creating fundamental new identity within your directory of someone that may or may not have access for as long as you want them to have access. So that was Azure AD B2B one-time passcodes. And we're flipped over. All right, so super fast, and like I said, it would be great to go into hours and hours within this context, especially having deep deployment discussions. For those of you that are power users or really want to get your hands dirty, that's where we can talk at the Expo booth, or we could also have conversations later. But for people with varying levels of comfort in this, that at least gives you a concept of opportunities to modernize. You're going to follow up and hopefully go to all the identity security sessions. There's the identity developer session if that's relevant to you. And that'll give you the full picture at least a 2-day level of opportunities that you can drive within Azure AD. But think of all of the data now. If you've taken some of these modernization opportunities, think of the data that's being generated. Okay, now we've got 20, 50, 200 applications connected. There's a lot of authentication information, sign-in information, and now we have within our own world of auditing, maybe we've promoted people to administrators, we've done provisioning, so there's activity being generated, and all that data is residing within Azure AD Logs as well. So Whether you want to drive this into some of your own analytic tools or whether you want to leverage some of the tools available within Azure Active Directory, you have this opportunity, and it would be a great way, again, to drive compliance, to really have a concept of what's going on in your identity ecosystem, but to complement some of the advanced security reporting tools. Look at some of these foundational sign-in information. So I really consider this, it's not really a direct pillar, it's more of a foundational opportunity underlying all of this to please go leverage the data that's available and being generated to you here within your identity as the control plane ecosystem. So the solution that we have, we released this last summer, and we're really running close to GA. So again, something that I hope will have information really soon on. So for the folks, we fully appreciate, please play with public previews, but we understand the needs to, you want to have high confidence to actually deploy stuff. So if you want to wait for GA, we'll have some very exciting news on this soon. But within Azure AD, you have two main logs. So you have some additional security reports, some other dashboards that you'll hear about over the next 2 days. But really, if you're thinking more of the initial foundational access level, you have audit logs and sign-in logs. So think of sign-in logs as just login, authentication, access, gaining items, events. And think of audit logs as like everything else. And between these two pieces, you have a pretty good concept of, at least from an access and what's happening internally, but what's externally trying to come into your network. This is giving you a concept of what's happening here. And now, how do we really scalably look at this within visualizations, within some kind of driving of insights to take some actions and to help prioritize what needfully you need to do within your IT world. There's a bazillion things you guys have to work on, but maybe we can glean some insights and prioritize some of that work. So if we can pull these sign-in logs, first, foundationally, we want to store them or stream them. So we do have these sign-in logs generated, and you can complement them with a Azure Monitor storage account, or you can have them sent to an event hub. But we want to then go take this data and do something with it. You may be creating custom analytics scripting today, but hopefully within the Azure AD world, we can make that a little simpler for you. Drive some insights, get some analytics, and really learn from the power of these logs. And then if needful, if you want to integrate them to a SIEM and do some analytics on that side, or drive some of the security event visibility that you so need. If you already have that infrastructure, great. We have some pre-built integrations for you. But if you don't and you want to go into the Azure AD world, we have that as well. And then within Azure AD, there's an integrated tool, Log Analytics, the Log Analyzer, that you could potentially already be driving in some of this custom analysis, visualization, and searching at a schema level. But what's really cool about this, and we'll take a look at this in a second, is you can drive some really cool visualizations directly in the portal. And we love quick charts, graphs, anything that we can then go drive to any other higher, hopefully your IT decision drivers and prioritizers, but if there's some kind of management layer above you where you truly in your heart believe that you need to do X, Y, Z, but you've got to show some data, this is a really great tool to quickly generate that data, to really get that extra emphasis and get the work done that you believe needs to get done. So let's take a look at what this looks like within the portal. I'll switch over. Cool. So we're back here in the tenant that we used for the HR analysis. And this already has a lot of these built-in integrations and dashboards that we'll take a look at. So we're going to go to Azure Active Directory. And if you want to get comfortable, again, depends on your level of comfort. But if you want to start to get comfortable with the logs, the baseline logs available in Azure AD, so not some of the super advanced security reports, you're going to want to play in these two worlds. So within the Azure AD menu, you've got sign-ins, and then you can customize here all of the schema columns that you want to show available. Here we're kind of looking at users, timing. Interesting. There's lots of logins from Amsterdam as I've been practicing my demo in my hotel room. But it's some examples of some sign-ins here. So just at an initial level, if you wanted to prioritize some of the columns that are important to you, but we can go extra deep layers to drive into this. So similarly within the audit logs, you can take a look at, as it's loading. Again, some examples of preloaded columns that you want to have. You can add more columns. You can search by different things. I wanted to add also in the sign-in logs, an important one if it's already pre-built in. We'll do it. Client app. So what you'll probably hear, or if you haven't heard, something that you can find quickly online, it's like the 5 steps to ensuring your identity security infrastructure. And a big one of them is please, please, please block legacy authentication. So legacy authentication allows a circumvent of MFA requirements because it's not complex enough to recognize that handshake of, hey, cool, this person is authentication good, but hey, I want to go do another MFA as well. Legacy authentication isn't savvy enough for that. So that first level of authentication is good enough from these clients. And so it circumvents your extra security layer. So what we said earlier today, oh my God, please turn on MFA. If you turn on MFA, go block legacy auth in the same breath. So this is giving you a really quick access. If you don't want to do all the crazy log analytics, you don't want to drive into analysis, I just want to get comfortable with sign-in logs, you can instantly see some of these legacy authentication examples, IMAP, POP, old Office clients, SMTP. So right away, if we pick one of these and we're starting to see sign-ons on this is giving you a priority of a client app that we need to turn off quickly or have a plan to get whatever X users are on this away so that we can truly turn off legacy authentication. So that's just an initial level. We're going to look at diagnostic settings here. So now that we've got the logs and we're a tiny bit more comfortable, we're starting to understand some of the information that's available. We have a couple instances here of where we're driving the storage of these. So we're saying, take our logs over to Sumo Logic integration. So as I was mentioning before, I think we have a few key of the SIEM tools pre-integrated in with Azure AD. So Splunk's probably a really popular one as well, Sumo Logic, and I believe QRadar is our third one. So you can go ahead and drive the storage of these logs and then stream them into the SIEM of your choice. We have another example here of we're driving the logs into Azure Event Hub, and also we're driving them into Azure Log Workspace, which is where we're going to drive some of the analytics. And then we also got a PowerShell checkers here. So we can click through one layer to a little bit of this information to say, okay, we're taking the logs, we're putting them in a storage account, we're putting them in an event hub, and we're sending them to log analytics. So these are your 3 choices. If you do all 3, you get the maximum power. And then you also can take a retention decision. So based on the compliance and retention policies within your organization, here it's saying retention 0 actually means retention infinite. But let's say if you can only hold these for 90, 180 days or whatever, so be it, you can take these decisions here. So we're going to back out of this and go back into Azure AD. And then we're going to play around into logs. So this is a first layer. Okay, you're comfortable with the logs and doing some initial searching. Now we're going to be able to do some quick text-based searching, specifically within the schema if we want to search by, duration is in a certain period, or if you're looking for a particular region of login, or, oh my gosh, I don't have any user that's logging in from X country and I'm seeing these sign-in logs. You can create these really quick queries today. So just a couple examples of the information. Here's one that we can pull in. So within 7 days, we want to look at sign-in counts by application. So this is where we're trying to not drive some really deep security information, just maybe some fundamental information about application usage. So let's say you have hundreds and hundreds of applications within your organization, and maybe you want to narrow that down. So we're going to run a query here, and there's some great resources online of getting access to this information. But you can see here now, we've got available okay, so we've got different applications. Who's the user that's accessing them, what's some login information, what's the physical location, what's a signing count. But what's really cool is then you could instantly build visualizations from this, and you can pivot accordingly. So right, this is saying, looks like app access panel is the most popular one, and maybe we'll want to do a pie chart. And let's go to who are the people that are looking at this. Oh, wow, T. Perkins is really popular. If there's a particular username that strikes out that's really odd, or maybe a dummy account that's getting some access, that would be something to watch for. Oh, okay, wow, someone's accessing from a particular region that I'm not comfortable with. So this is just helping do these quick visualizations, one, either to justify to management to take action, or two, to go off and, hey, let's go talk to these users and understand what they're doing. And then I want to just really show on the log analytics workspace, if you want to go an extra layer, you can build in some of these text-based schema searching into a actual custom dashboard of your choice. So again, great documents that you can go and dive and research and understand all this. But here's one example of sign-in events. And we can customize it based on time as it's loading. So we can say, you know, this is custom of the last 2 days, but maybe we want to look at the last 30 days. But now we could look at what's some popular applications, what kind of devices, location, you know, ooh, legacy auth sign-ins. So if someone's doing that, you know, here's Edward Hunt. Uh-oh, let's go have a conversation with Edward and make sure we have a plan to shut him off, clients that are using legacy auth. So some great built-in tools, tons of documents online to do this. Wanted to give you a quick taste. But once you drive that modernization, please go play with this stuff and really drive some insights and security into there. So just wanted to finish off real quick to give you some guidance of what you guys can take advantage of over the next couple days. So documentation resources, primarily what I would say is read our Azure AD identity blog. This is where we're going to have all the latest and greatest public preview and GA information. We're posting at least a blog a week, if not 2, 3, 4. And we're also working on some roll-ups, some other interesting analysis curation of great Microsoft tips and tricks. Tomorrow, please, I would love for you, we brought out some big dogs here. So Rob Lefferts and Alex Weiner are going to talk about Microsoft 365 broadly. So that very initial couple minutes that we talked about security, they're going to go into much greater detail, and they're brilliant at it, so they're going to do a much greater job of explaining our broader security landscape. And then if you are interested in more of our identity sessions, we have the lab that I had mentioned. It's only 50 seats. It's currently booked. If people drop out and you want to hover and wait to see if you can get in, if you just want a baseline, feel comfortable about creating or linking SaaS apps into Azure AD, check that out. We've got the Zero Trust Mechanics live with Alex and Jeremy. Patterns and practices to secure identity infrastructure. So this is going to be your identity security session. If you go to one other identity security session or identity session at all, please go to this. We have a great guest speaker. Martin Kuppinger of Kuppinger Cole is going to be here talking with Alex about some insights of patterns and practices we see within this. And then tomorrow we're going to have more of the identity developer context. So I'm going to be available for a few minutes now on questions. I'm sure you guys also have to run off to stuff. They're going to have plenty of time tomorrow because there's 1,000 of you and one of me, but please come find me in the expo booth as well if you have any questions on Azure AD, and we'll try to get you sorted out. So thank you for sharing your initial time today and joining us and hearing a little bit about the product, and I hope we can help you and modernize your identity. Thank you.